So you're watching Dog-Eared Musings. I'm Monica, and we are switching things up a little bit. You'll notice that you're not in my lovely apartment right now. We're in the Kismet Bookstore in Verona, Wisconsin, and I'm with the amazing poet Shahayra Majumder after her reading of her new chapbook, The Unreliable Narrator. And we're going to do a little bit of an interview where she's going to talk about her process in poetry writing. Why did you choose poetry, and kind of what influenced you to start writing in the first place?
Yeah, good question. My dad is also a poet, but he's never formally published a lot of his poetry, but he was always the type to be inspired by something and then with napkin and a pen or whatever was available at the time, a highlighter or whatever, back of receipts, he would just write down poems or ideas that would come to his mind. So I watched him do that. So it was something that I tried to start doing when I felt inspired as well. And so it's kind of just been something that I've been growing ever since I was little. I would say I started writing poems just for myself when I was dealing with things that I felt like I didn't have a better creative way to express outside of just writing, and using some poetic license to articulate certain things. So I think just found myself falling into it as I experienced things in life, and only formally called them poems in a collection once I realized, after stepping back, that there were a series of these that tell a similar story, and then that's how this chapbook was born.
What time of day do you like to write, and do you write with snacks? What is your process of writing during your day?
Yeah, it's honestly very similar to what my dad's process was, and a lot of times I'll be doing whatever it is that I'm working on, or in whatever social setting, and I'll have a thought where I'm like, oh, I should write that down. And so I have a folder in my notes app called Poem Ideas, where they're not fully fleshed out things, but maybe there's just a thought that I've had that feels inspiring to me, and I'll go back and revisit that when I feel okay, I'm experiencing this emotion again. Let me go back there and see what exactly is coming up. So that's sort of my process. It's kind of just when I get ideas, I don't want to lose them, so I write them down, and then I might come back to it months later, or maybe it'll just be oh, I have this idea and I'm gonna write it down, and it's already a poem once I get it down.
What is it like being a poet in the Midwest? What are the unique benefits, and what are some cons?
I think I'm bringing a diverse perspective and voice to just common poetry in Madison. I think a lot of the poets that I've met and have worked with are white, so it's nice to be a non-white person adding in my voice, and some of the elements that I talk about have to do with racial discrimination. Actually, a lot of my poems are about pain about that, even if they're not explicitly calling at that. So it's nice to, provide some literature that other folks that look like me, have similar experiences to me, can vibe with also. And poetry isn't just exclusive for not white people.
A lot of the times the rooms are startlingly white. And
Yeah.
is there anything that you do to like kind of psych yourself up before like going into those spaces, especially because a lot of your poems are so vulnerable?
Yeah. I don't know. I think what psychs me up is when I'm up there, and my poems are, very personal, clearly about my experiences. So what psychs me up is knowing that if I have a platform to share my experiences, then like I dare someone to tell me that my experience isn't what it was. Like you can't invalidate what literally I experienced and am sharing. So I think what's exciting to me about that is that it's not up for debate. It's not a challenge. Like you are just now forced to confront the fact that there is a non-white person in front of you telling you about their struggles with racism, and it does put pressure on white people and others to confront that, whether or not they want to. And it's exciting, it's empowering to share some of that. And yeah, I just know that it's not something that people can really like make an argument out of, because it's personal to me and immutable by whatever you want to think or feel about it. So
Sure.
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's the great thing about sharing writing is like you can't really argue your own experience. Like it's your experience.
Yeah.
And how do you use your poetry as an exercise in vulnerability?
Well, firstly, it's just having a way for me to explore my feelings personally. So I first figure out, with my writing what exactly I'm experiencing and the types of things I'm dealing with, whether it's like loss of friendship or like confusion over my role in a dispute, or I don't know, guilt, anger, like those things I can work out and sort of tease through the complicated web of emotions that I might be experiencing with regards to something in particular. And first, having understood those emotions, I can then start to set better boundaries about like, okay, I don't want to be friends with people that make me feel these feelings. And that's even a poem in itself. Yeah, so it's helpful in creating protection for me by just allowing me to determine what's important. And it is cathartic to share, and having gone through that process with some of these poems, putting it out there, that's empowering too.
When you read poetry, what is stuff that you look for as a reader?
Even in my writing, my poetry, I feel like, is very visual. Like even though it's prose, like the stanza structure a lot of times is intentional. So I'll oftentimes look for things like that in the form to see if there's like added meaning that a writer's trying to convey in that way. But when I'm reading, what strikes me personally as a reader is just artistic, poetic ways of articulating certain feelings or like moments that people notice in a way that makes you think. So poets that do that, I really admire Carrie, who I did the poetry reading with. I think a lot of her poems do that for me. It's Halloween right now, so I'm thinking of Edgar Allan Poe. I like some of his work too. as well as Emily Dickinson. She also does a lot of what I was speaking about when it comes to like the stanza structure. And honestly, though, like when I'm thinking about how people creatively say things, a lot of times I see that more in lyrics and music than in a lot of poets that I know, which is, I mean, yeah, poetry, music, kind of the same thing. But one of the musicians currently that comes to mind that has been doing that for me is Hosier.
Okay.
I love all of his songs. I think they're all poetic, and yeah, just some of the ways that he expresses how he's experienced like love, or I don't know, just feelings of obsession or like dark feelings too, are just very intriguing.
If you could have anyone like alive or dead throughout time read this book, who would you want to read it?
If I'm thinking thematically about who I'd want to read it, the honest answer is probably an ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that so many musicians and comedians and writers write work inspired by people who've like frustrated or broken hearts, and I think that makes a lot of sense to like want to, like, there's no such thing as closure, but like I think that's as like that validation or like feeling seen in that way is kind of the closest. Yeah, and also because a lot of the writing is born out of healing from that breakup, in particular the one I'm thinking about. So yeah, I think that it would just be nice to share kind of where it all landed me. So yeah. If you could have those readers think about anything before they're reading your book, what would that be? I think coming into it, I would hope they're just excited to read it, and ready to go for a ride, and openly like consider each poem as an individual piece, for what it is. Like, yes, they're a part of a collection, but I'd like for each poem to be like standalone great, in its own right. So I'd hope that people were, willing to mull over each one as they come into reading the book, and then leaving it, I don't know, I just want people to feel moved by anything in particular. Like, it doesn't have to be, like my favorite poem or whatever, but I would just hope that something stuck with them. What were some things that you wish that either a younger version of you got from a more experienced writer, or like what tips would you give to anybody out there? I would just say to just do it. Like, definitely don't hesitate or feel like you're not, adequate enough of a writer to publish, because self-publishing is so accessible and there is an audience for everyone. So yeah, I think just the sooner you pull the trigger, the sooner you're doing it and can start to honor your writing in that way. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think that's a good place to end it. Again, this is The Unreliable Narrator, and where can we find your books for people who don't live in the Midwest?
It's available on barnesandnobles.com. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm a pretty big deal. I'm interviewing a Barnes & Noble author right now. So yeah, again, this has been Dog-Eared Musings. I'm Monica. Happy readings.